The pot was already boiling when he grabbed her wrist, in front of every customer, in front of every person who had ever doubted her. Baba Sule wanted his money and he did not care who was watching. But what happened next? What Chidinma did to solve that problem would cost her something no amount of money could ever buy back. She was not greedy, she was not reckless, she was just a sister who could not bear to watch her younger brother lose everything because she could not make enough from a pepper soup pot. That is all this was in the beginning, a sister trying to do the right thing. But the road to destruction rarely announces itself, it just opens a door and waits. Welcome to Folk Tales by Right. Please be part of our community by subscribing and let's dive into tonight's story. The pot was already boiling when Baba Sule grabbed her wrist. "Where is my money, Chidinma?" His voice cut through the noise of the evening strip like a knife through soft yam. Customers turned. A woman sucking pepper soup from a bone stopped mid-sip. Even the generator at Madame Vero's stall down the road seemed to pause. Chidinma did not flinch. She had rehearsed this moment too many times in her sleep to flinch now. She slowly lowered her ladle, wiped her hands on her wrapper, and looked Baba Sule dead in the eye. "You will get your money." "When?" He stepped closer. His breath smelled of stale palm wine and impatience. "You said that last month and the month before. 3 months, Chidinma. 3 months you have been cooking on my land and eating my goodwill like it is free." "I am not eating your goodwill. I am working." "Walking?" He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh designed to humiliate. He swept his hand across her modest setup. 2 pots, a wooden bench, a flickering gas lamp fighting the dark. "This is walking? My daughter earns more selling data on her phone." The customers laughed. Some looked away. Chidinma felt the heat rise in her chest, not from the fire, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere she had been carefully keeping the lid on for a very long time. She said nothing. She turned back to her pot, picked up her ladle, and stirred. That night, after the last customer left and the strip grew quiet, she sat on her bench and counted everything. Every note, every coin, every crumpled 50 naira bill she had smoothing flat and saved like a prayer. It was not enough. It was nowhere near enough. Rent, Emeka's school fees, the cracked gas cylinder she had been managing with a piece of wire for 6 weeks, none of it was close to being solved. She looked at her mother's wooden ladle hanging on the nail above the pots. Her mother had used that ladle for 22 years. She had built a life with it. Not a big life, not a comfortable life, but a life with dignity. And when she died, she had left Chidinma that ladle, that bench, and those 2 pots like a quiet instruction. Keep going. Chidinma closed her eyes and pressed her palms together. "I am trying, Mama. I am really trying." It was then she heard the heels. Sharp, confident, expensive, the kind of heels that announce money before the person wearing them even comes into view. Chidinma opened her eyes and saw Zara stepping out of the shadow of the strip, gold catching the lamplight at her wrists and neck, a bag on her arm that cost more than Chidinma's monthly earnings. Zara, who 6 months ago had been borrowing 200 naira for Okada fare. "Business good?" Zara asked, smiling the way people smile when they already know the answer. Chidinma studied her. "What happened to you?" Zara sat down across from her, uninvited, and crossed her legs slowly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Chidinma gestured at all of her, the shoes, the bag, the jewelry, the whole new skin she seemed to be wearing. "All of this. 6 months ago, you were borrowing my pepper soup on credit." Zara laughed softly. "Things change." "Things don't just change, Zara. Not like this. Not this fast." Zara was quiet for a moment. She looked down the strip at the darkness beyond the last stall, toward the old fishing docks where the road became unpaved and the street lights stopped working years ago. Then she looked back at Chidinma, and something passed across her face, something that was not quite a smile. "There is someone," she said, almost in a whisper. "A man. They call him the consultant." Chidinma felt something shift in the air. She did not know why. She pulled her wrapper tighter. "He doesn't take your money. He doesn't ask for anything you can see or hold. He just," she paused, choosing her words, "he makes arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" "The kind that work." Chidinma stared at her for a long moment. "Zara, what did you do?" But Zara was already standing, already adjusting her bag on her shoulder, already becoming the woman who had answers to questions she was not willing to finish asking. "I'm just telling you what is available," she said lightly. "What you do with that information is up to you." She walked back into the dark. Chidinma sat there long after she left, her fire dying slowly beneath the pots, her mother's ladle still hanging on the nail, perfectly still. She told herself she was not going to think about it. She told herself a woman like her did not chase shadows and whispers into the dark. She told herself a lot of things that night. But the next morning, Emeka came home with a letter. The school's letterhead was faded, but the words were clear. Final notice. Fees outstanding. Student will be unable to sit examinations unless payment is received within 5 working days. 5 days. Chidinma read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her wrapper, picked up her mother's ladle, and began to stir her morning pot. She stirred slowly. She stirred like a woman making a decision she already knew she had made. If you are feeling this story already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There is so much more coming, and you do not want to miss where this goes. The building near the old fishing docks was not what she expected. She had imagined something hidden, something that looked like a secret. But it sat plainly on the edge of the unpaved road, like any other structure. A low, quiet building with a green door and a single bulb burning above the entrance. No sign, no name, just the door, the light, and the smell of the docks somewhere behind it. Salt and something older mixing in the evening air. She knocked. He opened the door himself. The consultant was not tall, not frightening, not anything she could have prepared herself for. He was perhaps 50, with a clean-shaved face, a pressed agbada, and the kind of stillness that made you feel like you had just entered a room where time moved differently. He looked at her the way a doctor looks at a patient, already knowing the diagnosis before a single word is spoken. "Chidinma," he said, not a question. She blinked. "How do you—" "Come in." The inside of the building was too clean, too ordered, too quiet. No television, no radio, just a low table, 2 chairs, and the faint smell of something herbal underneath something else she could not name, something smoky, something that had no business being pleasant, but was. She sat down because her legs asked her to. He sat across from her, folded his hands, and said nothing, just waited. The silence was not uncomfortable. That was the strange part. It should have been uncomfortable, but it wrapped around her like something familiar, and before she knew it, she was talking, telling him about Baba Sule, about Emeka's letter, about the gas cylinder held together with wire, about her mother's ladle, and how she stirred the pot every morning like a prayer that was not being answered. He listened without interrupting, without nodding too much, without that rehearsed sympathy people perform when they want you to think they care. He simply received everything she said, and when she finished, he spoke. "You are not here because you are weak," he said. "You are here because you are tired. There is a difference." Something in her chest cracked open at that, just slightly, just enough. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. "Prosperity," he said simply. "Your food will draw people, more than you can manage, more than your strip has ever seen. Money will come in ways that will surprise you. Your brother will be taken care of. Your landlord will stop being a problem." She swallowed. "And what do you want in return?" He smiled. It was a patient smile, the smile of a man who had answered this question many times. 3 things, he said. Small things. Rules, not sacrifices. First, you will not light your fire until I send you a signal each evening. Second, you will never wash your pots after midnight. Third, he paused, and in that pause, the room seemed to contract slightly. You will never feed anyone from your family from those pots. Not a taste, not a sip, nothing. Chidinma stared at him. That is all? That is all. It sounded so reasonable. That was the thing she would think about later. How reasonable it all sounded in that room, in that chair, with that man sitting across from her, looking like someone who was doing her a favor. And if I break one of the rules, he tilted his head, then the arrangement accelerates, the terms shift, and what is asked of you becomes something you cannot negotiate. She should have stood up then. She knew it even in that moment. Some part of her, the part that sounded like her mother's voice, was already on its feet and heading for the green door. But Emeka's face appeared in her mind. The letter. 5 days. The way he had handed it to her that morning without a word, his school bag still on his back, looking at her with the specific exhaustion of a child who has learned not to ask for things. She held out her palm. The consultant reached beneath the table and produced a small, flat piece of cloth, blackened at one end. He pressed it into her palm firmly and held it there for 3 seconds. She felt warmth, not heat, warmth, like a hand she had known before. Then it was over. You will receive the signal by evening tomorrow, he said, standing, already moving toward the door. Do not be late to your store. She stepped back into the night air and walked home quickly without looking back. She told herself it was nothing, a ritual, superstition, something old men impressed Agbadas did to impress desperate women. She told herself that whatever worked, worked, and this was simply a transaction. By the fourth day, she knew it was not nothing. The customers came before she even finished setting up. Not the usual faces, not the regulars who came more out of habit than hunger. These were strangers, men in good shoes, women who clearly had options, people who could have eaten anywhere on the strip and chose her. They sat, they ate, they closed their eyes in that particular way people do when food hits something deeper than appetite. "What did you put in this?" a man in a white kaftan asked her, setting down his bowl. "The same thing I always put in it," she said. He shook his head slowly. No, something is different." And he came back the next night and the night after that, and he brought people. Within 2 weeks, Baba Sule collected his 3 months in full and did not meet her eyes when he did it. Within 3 weeks, Emeka's fees were paid, his name restored on the register, his school bag no longer a symbol of quiet shame. She bought back her mother's sewing machine from the pawn shop on Ago Street. She replaced the cracked cylinder. She bought herself a new wrapper, deep blue, the color her mother always said looked like authority on her skin. She stood in front of her stall one evening before the signal came, looked at what she had built, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she exhaled. She should have paid more attention to what she was not noticing. The customer who had argued with her loudly over pricing on a Tuesday, the one who had pointed his finger in her face and called her prices highway robbery. By Thursday, he was in a hospital bed, his family bewildered, the doctors finding nothing obvious to explain it. She heard about it through the strip grapevine and felt a cold stone drop into her stomach. She stirred her pot and told herself it was a coincidence. She told herself that a lot in those weeks. About the customer. About Madame Vero's stall growing quieter every night. Customers drifting away for no reason anyone could name. Madame Vero herself looking around in confusion, like a woman who had misplaced something she could not identify. About the waking at 3 in the morning. Her body pulling her upright out of a dead sleep with a need to go and check on the pots. Not out of worry, but out of something more compulsive than worry. Something that did not feel entirely like her own impulse. And about Zara. Zara came back to the strip on a Wednesday evening, and Chidinma almost did not recognize her. The gold was still there, the shoes still expensive, the bag still announcing money. But her face had changed. There was a hollowness behind her eyes that the lamplight caught in an unsettling way. Like looking at a room where the furniture was all in place, but the person who lived there had quietly left. She sat down at the bench and Chidinma poured her a bowl without asking. Zara looked at it and did not eat. "Zara," Chidinma leaned forward. "Talk to me. What is happening to you?" Zara opened her mouth. Something moved across her expression. Urgency, fear, the desperate shape of a warning trying to form itself into words. Her lips moved, and then her hand flew to her throat. Not dramatically, not performatively, just a sudden involuntary grip, fingers pressing against her own neck like something inside was pulling the words back down. Her eyes went wide. Then she picked up her bag, stood, and walked away without a word. Chidinma watched her go and sat very still for a long time. If this story is gripping you the way it is gripping Chidinma right now, drop a comment below and tell us. And if you have not liked the video yet, now is a good time. Stay with us, the worst is still coming. It was Emeka who noticed first. Not the waking at 3 in the morning, he slept too deeply for that. Not the customers or the money or the sudden overflow of people crowding their end of the strip. What Emeka noticed was smaller than all of that and therefore more frightening. He noticed that his sister had stopped humming. Chidinma had hummed her whole life. In the kitchen, over the pots, walking to the market, even in her sleep, their mother used to say. It was the kind of thing you stop hearing because it becomes part of the air in a house. But when it stops, the silence it leaves behind has a shape. He watched her for 3 days before he said anything. He watched the way she moved around the pots with a precision that felt less like skill and more like instruction. He watched her flinch one evening when he reached past her to grab a cup near the store, his hand passing too close to the pot. She grabbed his wrist, hard, faster than made sense, and then immediately let go, turning back to her fire like nothing had happened. "Chi," he said quietly, "what is in that pot?" "Pepper soup, same as always." But she did not look at him when she said it. The following afternoon, while Chidinma was at the market buying catfish, Emeka went to the back of their street and knocked on the low wooden door of Mama Agba's compound. Mama Agba was 70-something, nobody knew exactly, with eyes that had the quality of still water, the kind that looks shallow until you step in it. She retired from practice years ago, or so she said, but people still came to her door with things they could not explain, and she never turned them away. She listened to Emeka without blinking. When she finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "The humming," she said finally. "You are sure it has stopped?"
Completely. She nodded slowly, the way old people nod when a thing confirms what they already suspected. She stood, moved to a shelf crowded with small wrapped bundles, cloth tied with thread in colors that meant nothing to Emeka, but clearly meant something to her. She selected one, held it briefly between her palms, and handed it to him. Put this under the leg of her bench, the back left leg. Do not tell her. Do not explain it. Just place it and leave it. What will it do? Mama Agba looked at him with those still water eyes. It will remind her that she still has a choice. Emeka did it that evening, crouching behind the store while Chidinma served the customer at the front, sliding the small bundle beneath the back left leg of her bench with hands that were not entirely steady. Then he stood up, straightened his shirt, and went home to do his homework like a boy with nothing on his mind. 3 nights later, Chidinma broke the second rule. It was not deliberate. She had been on her feet since 4 in the afternoon, and by the time the last customer left and the strip grew quiet, it was close to 1 in the morning. Her body was moving on automatic instructions of exhaustion, packing, wiping, washing, and she had the pot halfway clean before the realization hit her like cold water. She froze, looked at the pots, looked at her wet hands. She did not sleep that night. He came just before dawn. No knock. She simply looked up from where she was sitting on her bench, still dressed, still awake, and he was standing at the edge of the lamplight. The consultant, pressed agbada, clean-shaved face, that same terrible stillness. He looked at the pots. Then he looked at her.
You broke the second rule, he said. It was an accident. I was tired. I did not... It does not matter why. His voice was not angry. That was what made it worse. It was completely, perfectly calm. What matters is that the arrangement must now move forward. The next stage requires a different kind of commitment. He let the silence hold for a moment. Then his eyes moved, just slightly, just briefly, toward the doorway of the house behind the stall, toward the school bag hanging on the hook just inside the entrance. Emeka's bag. Chidinma stood up so fast, her bench scraped the ground. No! He simply looked at her. I said no! Her voice was shaking, but she did not let it stop her. Whatever you think you are owed, it is not him. It will never be him. Take back everything. Take the customers, take the money, take all of it. But you will not go near my brother. The consultant studied her for a long moment with those unreadable eyes. Then something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, not anger, but the faint clinical interest of a man recalculating. He turned and walked back into the dark without another word. Chidinma stood there until she could no longer hear his footsteps. Then her legs gave way, and she sat down hard on the ground beside her pots and shook. She was still shaking when morning came, and she found Mama Agba's bundle beneath the leg of her bench. She held it in both hands, and something broke open inside her. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in the way of things that have been holding too long under too much pressure. She walked to Mama Agba's door at sunrise, still holding the bundle, and when the old woman opened the door and looked at her, Chidinma did not even manage a full sentence. I did something terrible, she said. Mama Agba opened the door wider. I know. Come in. What happened over the next 2 nights in Mama Agba's compound was not something Chidinma ever described in full to anyone. She said only that it was long, that it was painful in ways that had nothing to do with the body, and that at several points she was not sure it was going to work. Mama Agba and 4 elders from the surrounding streets walked through both nights with a focused, quiet intensity that reminded Chidinma of sojourns, people who had done difficult things many times before and understood that the difficulty did not diminish with experience. It simply became more familiar. On the 3rd morning, it was done. The customer stopped coming that same day, not gradually, immediately, like a tap turned off. By evening, the strip was back to its ordinary noise, and her stall sat in its ordinary obscurity, 2 pots and a wooden bench and a flickering gas lamp, as unremarkable as it had always been. Madame Vero's crowd returned. Chidinma watched it happen from across the strip and felt nothing but relief. The cracked cylinder came back, the tight evenings came back, Baba Sule's footsteps at the end of the month came back like an unwelcome song she knew every word to. But Emeka came home from school that evening with a test paper folded in his bag, 78%, a red star in the corner, and he held it out to her across the pots with a quiet pride that cost her everything she had not to cry. She took the paper, she read it twice, she folded it carefully and pressed it against her chest. Zara was never seen on the strip again. Some people said she had traveled, others said she had simply moved. Chidinma did not ask. She understood that some debts are paid in ways that do not show up on any paper, and that whatever Zara owed, the ledger had been settled in a currency nobody talked about openly. On the 4th evening, after it was all over, Chidinma arrived at her stall just before dusk, lit her fire herself, no signal, no waiting, just her own 2 hands and her own gas, and began to stir her pot. The smell of pepper and catfish and crayfish lifted into the cooling air of the strip, familiar and honest and entirely her own.
She reached up and touched Mama Agba's wooden ladle on its nail. Then she took it down and used it for the first time since everything began. She stirred slowly, the way her mother had taught her, patient, steady, without rushing the heat. A young woman appeared at the edge of her stall, a new face, tired eyes, a too-tight wrapper, the particular look of someone counting things in their head that do not add up. She reminded her of herself. "How much is a bowl?" the young woman asked. Chidinma looked at her for a moment. Then she smiled, not the performed smile of commerce, but something older and quieter and earned. "Sit down first," she said. "We talk about price after." She ladled the soup, and the steam rose between them in the lamplight, and the strip moved around them the way it always had, loud and relentless and indifferent, and Chidinma stood at the center of her small, hard, entirely her own life, and felt for the first time in a long time like herself. The finest pepper soup is made slowly, with patience and clean hands. There is no other way. And that is the story of Chidinma, a woman who went looking for a shortcut and found out the road doesn't bend that easily. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of what she carried, please like this video right now. It genuinely helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe if you have not already, because we tell these kinds of stories every week, real, raw, and rooted. And drop a comment below. Tell us, have you ever been so desperate that the wrong door started looking like the right one? We read every single comment. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. We will see you in the next one.